Take a moment right now. Before your mind starts analyzing, just let your heart breathe for a second. What you're about to hear didn't reach you by accident. Something inside you has been quietly aching for a while now. You've been holding yourself together for far too long without any real answers. There's one name that still shows up in your thoughts the second the world goes quiet around you. You might act like you're fine on the outside. You smile when people expect you to smile. You answer messages, go to work, take care of your responsibilities, and keep moving through each day as if everything is completely normal. To everyone around you, it looks like you've accepted what happened. They assume you've healed. They believe you've found peace and left the past behind. Even you may have started telling yourself the same story because it's easier than admitting there's still something inside you that refuses to settle. But beneath that calm exterior, your heart has been carrying a conversation that your mind keeps trying to interrupt. Every time you tell yourself you're over it, your heart quietly asks, "Then why does it still hurt?" Every time you convince yourself you don't care anymore, something inside reminds you that indifference doesn't need to be rehearsed. When healing is genuine, it doesn't require constant reminders. It simply becomes your reality. Many people become experts at looking okay. They know exactly how to laugh at the right moment, how to avoid difficult conversations, and how to keep themselves so busy that they never have to sit alone with their own thoughts. Productivity becomes a hiding place. Entertainment becomes a distraction. Even helping other people sometimes becomes a way of avoiding the work that needs to happen within ourselves. The strange thing is that the heart is incredibly patient. It doesn't demand your attention every minute of the day. It simply waits. It waits until the room becomes quiet. It waits until the phone is put away. It waits until the distractions fade. Then it begins speaking again, not because it wants to make you suffer, but because it refuses to let you build a life on denial. What changes is us. Every memory either becomes a prison or a lesson depending on how we choose to carry it. If you continue asking why someone failed to love you the way you needed, the memory becomes heavier each time. But if you begin asking what that experience revealed about your own needs, boundaries, and values, the same memory starts transforming into wisdom. That transformation is uncomfortable because it requires honesty. Honesty often arrives before peace. None of those realizations mean you were weak. They mean you were human. Human beings naturally seek connection. We want to believe in the best version of the people we love. We want to trust that patience will eventually be rewarded and that enough understanding can fix almost anything. Those desires don't make you foolish. They simply make you someone who believed love could overcome every obstacle. But love alone cannot replace accountability. Love cannot force someone to become emotionally available. Love cannot create honesty where dishonesty has become a habit. Love cannot convince someone to choose growth if they remain committed to avoiding it. These are difficult truths because they remove the illusion of control. As long as you believe there was one more thing you could have done, you never have to face the possibility that the outcome was never yours to control in the first place. There comes a moment in every healing journey when you stop asking, "How do I make them understand?" and begin asking, "Why have I been working so hard to earn something that should have been freely given?" That question changes everything. It shifts your attention away from another person's choices and brings it back to your own life. Instead of constantly measuring your worth by someone else's attention, you begin measuring your peace by the decisions you make each day. You discover that self-respect isn't something another person gives you. It's something you practice, especially when your emotions tempt you to abandon it. Your heart already knows this. That's why it keeps whispering to you, Not to remind you of what you lost, but to remind you of what you've forgotten about yourself. You've forgotten how resilient you are. You've forgotten how much joy existed in your life before you started carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to hold. You've forgotten that your value existed long before someone entered your life and will continue long after they've left. The truth is that healing doesn't happen because someone finally apologizes. It doesn't happen because they suddenly realize your worth. It doesn't happen because justice is served exactly the way you imagined. Healing happens the moment you stop waiting for another person to unlock the door to your happiness and realize you've been holding the key all along. That realization doesn't erase the pain overnight, but it changes the direction of your life forever. Instead of walking in circles around the past, you begin taking small, steady steps toward a future that no longer depends on someone else's decisions. And that's when your smile stops being something you perform for the world. It becomes something that finally reflects the peace your heart has been patiently waiting for all along. Answer messages, go to work, take care of responsibilities, and keep moving through your daily routine as though nothing has changed. To everyone around you, it may seem like you've accepted everything that happened. They assume you've healed. They believe you've moved on. Even you may have convinced yourself that you've left the past behind. But deep down, somewhere beneath all the distractions, your heart already knows the truth. There is a quiet part of you that has been waiting patiently, not waiting for someone else's return, not waiting for an apology, not waiting for life to become perfect. It's been waiting for something much more important. It's been waiting for you to stop running from what you've been feeling. And tonight, that truth is finally ready to speak. Not to hurt you, not to shame you, not to reopen wounds that have already caused enough pain, but to set you free. Because the truth has never been your enemy. The lies you've told yourself to survive have been. Sometimes we become so focused on protecting ourselves from pain that we unknowingly build a prison around our own hearts. We tell ourselves that we're over it because admitting we're not feels too vulnerable. We convince ourselves that we never really cared because caring still hurts. We pretend someone didn't matter because accepting how deeply they affected us feels overwhelming. Yet the heart remembers everything the mind tries to erase. It remembers every moment you felt seen, every promise that gave you hope, every disappointment you tried to excuse, every goodbye that never really felt finished, and every silent question you've carried without an answer. Your heart doesn't forget because it isn't designed to erase experiences, it's designed to learn from them. The problem begins when we mistake avoidance for healing. Ignoring pain is not the same as overcoming it. Suppressing emotions is not the same as releasing them. Keeping yourself busy is not the same as finding peace. For a while, distraction works. New routines help. New conversations make life feel lighter. Responsibilities pull your attention elsewhere. Time passes, and the sharpest edges of the pain become duller. But eventually, usually during the quiet moments, the feelings return. Late at night, during a drive, while listening to a familiar song, looking at an old photograph, or simply sitting alone with your thoughts. Those moments aren't signs that you're failing. They're invitations. Your heart is gently asking you to stop pretending that unfinished emotions disappear simply because enough time has passed. Real healing begins the moment you become honest with yourself. Maybe the truth you've been avoiding isn't that you still love someone. Maybe it's that you never truly felt valued. Maybe it isn't that you miss them. Maybe you miss the version of yourself that existed before the disappointment. Maybe you don't actually want them back. Maybe you simply wanted the story to end differently. There is an enormous difference. Many people spend years chasing closure from another person when the closure they truly need can only come from within. Because closure is not always receiving an explanation. Sometimes closure is finally accepting that the explanation wouldn't change what happened. Sometimes closure is realizing that understanding someone's reasons doesn't erase the consequences of their actions. And sometimes closure is recognizing that your future deserves more attention than your unanswered questions. This realization changes everything when you stop asking, "Why did they do this?" and begin asking, "What is this experience trying to teach me?" Your entire perspective shifts. Pain transforms into wisdom, loss becomes direction, disappointment becomes discernment. And confusion slowly gives way to clarity. Your heart has been trying to teach you something all along. It has been showing you where your boundaries were too weak, where your expectations became dependent on another person's choices, where you confused potential with reality, where you accepted less than you truly deserved because you hoped things would eventually change. Hope is beautiful. But hope without honesty can become a trap. It's easy to fall in love with possibilities. We imagine who someone could become. We imagine the conversations we'll eventually have. We imagine the relationship we'll someday create. We imagine future happiness while ignoring present reality. The heart wants connection. But wisdom asks a different question. Not who could they become, but who are they consistently showing themselves to be? Consistency always reveals the truth. Words inspire hope. Patterns reveal reality. Someone may promise forever. They may apologize repeatedly. They may tell you everything you long to hear. But eventually their actions write the story that their words cannot. And deep inside, your heart has already read that story. You've known, you've sensed it, you've felt it. But perhaps admitting it seemed too painful. So you negotiated with reality. You lowered expectations, made excuses, waited longer, became more patient, believed one more conversation would finally change everything. Yet every extra chance came with another piece of your peace. Eventually, you began sacrificing yourself just to preserve the possibility of someone else choosing you. That's not love. Love never asks you to abandon yourself in order to earn it. Real love expands who you are. It doesn't shrink you. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth every single day. It doesn't force you to constantly decode mixed signals. It doesn't require endless emotional guessing games. Healthy love feels emotionally safe, not perfect, not effortless, but safe. Safe enough to communicate honestly, safe enough to disagree respectfully, safe enough to be vulnerable without fear of punishment or abandonment. Many people have mistaken emotional uncertainty for passion. The highs feel intoxicating because the lows are so painful. The relief after conflict feels like love. The occasional affection feels extraordinary because emotional consistency has become so rare. But emotional instability is not romance, it's emotional exhaustion. Your nervous system deserves rest. Your heart deserves stability. Your mind deserves peace. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is no longer chasing what keeps running away. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've finally started caring about yourself too. This doesn't happen overnight. Healing is rarely dramatic. It's usually quiet. It's choosing not to send the message. It's deciding not to check whether they've viewed your story. It's resisting the urge to create imaginary conversations that will never happen. It's learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions without letting them control your actions. Little by little, your identity begins returning. You remember the hobbies you abandoned, the dreams you postponed, the friendships you neglected, the parts of yourself that slowly disappeared while trying to make someone else stay. Healing is not becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before fear convinced you that your worth depended on someone else's approval. That version of you still exists. It has always existed. It simply became buried beneath disappointment. And tonight, your heart is asking you to uncover it again. Not through anger, not through revenge, not through proving anything to anyone, but through compassion. Compassion for the younger version of yourself who simply wanted to be loved. Compassion for every mistake you made while trying to protect your heart. Compassion for every time you stayed longer than you should have because leaving felt impossible. You were doing the best you could with the understanding you had at that time. Now you understand more. And with greater understanding comes greater responsibility. You cannot unknow what your heart already knows. You cannot continue pretending that constant anxiety feels like peace. You cannot keep ignoring the difference between temporary comfort and genuine fulfillment. Your future is quietly asking for a different version of you, a version that trusts actions more than promises, that honors boundaries instead of fearing rejection, that chooses peace over emotional chaos, that understands being alone is far less painful than constantly feeling alone beside someone who cannot truly meet you emotionally. There is incredible freedom in accepting reality exactly as it is. Reality may disappoint you, but it also liberates you. Fantasy keeps you waiting. Reality helps you move forward. And once you stop resisting the truth, something remarkable happens. The energy you've spent trying to change someone else's heart finally returns to your own life. You sleep more peacefully. You laugh more naturally. You notice opportunities you were too emotionally distracted to see before. You reconnect with people who genuinely appreciate your presence. You begin creating a life that no longer depends on one person's decisions. That is real freedom, not because the past suddenly disappears, but because it no longer controls your future. One day, you'll look back at this season differently, not as the chapter that broke you, but as the chapter that introduced you to yourself. You'll realize that losing what wasn't truly meant for you created space for everything that is. You'll recognize that every painful lesson strengthened your discernment. Every disappointment refined your standards. Every ending redirected your path. None of it was meaningless. Even the tears carried wisdom. Even the silence taught resilience. Even the unanswered questions revealed the importance of giving yourself the answers you've been searching for elsewhere. So tonight, stop fighting the truth your heart has been whispering for so long. Listen carefully, not to fear, not to regret, not to the voice that tells you you're unworthy. Listen to the quieter voice beneath all the noise, the one reminding you that your value has never depended on someone's ability to recognize it, the one reminding you that genuine love never requires you to betray yourself, the one reminding you that peace is possible, that healing is already happening, that every step forward, no matter how small, matters. And perhaps the greatest truth of all is this: you were never meant to spend your life chasing people who cannot see your worth. You were meant to become someone who sees it so clearly within yourself that you no longer settle for anything less than honesty, respect, emotional safety, and genuine love. Tonight is not the end of your story. It's the end of pretending you don't already know what your heart has been trying to tell you all along. And once you finally accept that truth, you don't move backward. You move forward with lighter shoulders, a clearer mind, stronger boundaries, and a heart that no longer fears its own honesty. Because the truth was never here to break you. It was always here to set you free. Your person got involved with someone else, but right now they're carrying an important message meant for you, one that might genuinely catch you off guard. Take a slow, deep breath before you keep going. Let it out gently. This message found its way to you for a reason. You didn't stumble onto this by chance. Something quiet, something persistent, has been steering you here all along. Maybe you've been thinking about one particular person more than usual lately. Maybe their presence keeps brushing up against your thoughts at the exact moments you least expect it. Or maybe you've been sitting with this strange mix of sadness, confusion, and hope that you can't fully put into words. This isn't here to rush you into anything, and it isn't here to scare you either. It's not trying to force you to believe something you're not ready to believe. It's simply here to speak to the part of you that's been waiting patiently for some clarity. And yes, your person did get involved with someone else. That's a truth that can't really be avoided or softened, no matter how we phrase it. But what you're about to understand goes far deeper than distance, deeper than silence, deeper than the sting of betrayal itself. There's a message coming from their heart right now, one they were simply too afraid to admit before. Let's start with the truth you always sensed but never actually heard out loud. Your intuition has been whispering this to you for a long time now. You always felt like something was a little off, even when they smiled at you, even when they insisted they were fine, even when they tried hard to convince you their decision was final and unshakable. You felt it in the pauses between their messages. You felt it in conversations that ended a little too abruptly. You felt it in the emotional walls that seemed to appear out of nowhere, with no real explanation attached to them. They didn't walk away because they stopped caring about you. They walked away because they were running from feelings they genuinely didn't know how to handle. When they got involved with someone else, it wasn't because that person somehow replaced you in their heart. It was because they convinced themselves that a different path would quiet down what they were feeling. But here's the truth. They're only just now starting to face head-on. You were never replaced. You were postponed. And that postponement has come with a cost they're still paying, whether they say it out loud or not. Now let's talk about why they chose someone else in the first place. This part might be a little hard to hear, but it matters for your own healing process. They chose someone else out of fear, not out of love. Fear of real depth, fear of emotional intensity, fear of being fully seen by another person. What they felt with you was never simple or easy. It was real, and that's exactly what scared them. Instead of leaning into that truth, they reached for something easier instead. That other connection felt safe precisely because it was shallow. Less courage required, less growth demanded, less responsibility to carry. But no matter where they went after that, some part of them kept following you around in quiet, invisible ways. They found themselves comparing the laughter, comparing the conversations, comparing even the silences between them and this new person to the silences they used to share with you, and every single comparison somehow led right back to you every single time. They realized something, though it came far too late to matter in the moment. What they had with you simply couldn't be recreated with anyone else. Then there's the guilt they've been quietly carrying around, mostly in silence. Your person doesn't actually rest as peacefully as you might imagine they do. Late at night, when everything else goes quiet, their thoughts get heavy and hard to shake off. They feel guilt for leaving without ever really explaining themselves properly. Guilt for choosing comfort over honesty when it mattered most. Guilt for hurting someone who only ever offered them the truth in return. They find themselves replaying old conversations over and over in their head. They remember things you said back then that finally make sense to them now, in hindsight. They know somewhere deep down that you never deserved to be left in that kind of confusion. This guilt isn't loud or obvious from the outside. It hides behind distractions and forced smiles, tucked away where no one else can see it, but it never actually leaves them alone. Running from their feelings never erased them. If anything, it only made those feelings stronger over time. You might be wondering why they couldn't just speak up sooner, if they were really feeling all of this the whole time. It wasn't because they didn't care about you, it was because they were afraid of themselves. Afraid that the moment they opened their mouth to speak honestly, everything would come spilling out all at once. Afraid of making promises they weren't sure they had the strength to actually keep. They were also afraid of how well you seemed to see the truth, even when nobody says a word about it out loud. They knew that the second real honesty entered the picture, there would be no turning back from it. So they chose silence instead. And that silence came with its own set of consequences. Whether they were ready to admit that or not. Something did shift inside them recently, though. It might not have been obvious from the outside looking in. They started feeling unseen, unheard, and emotionally empty in ways they hadn't expected. And in the middle of all that emptiness, your energy came right back to them, not just as some passing memory, but as something that felt undeniably true. They realized that what they felt with you was never chaos to begin with. It was a genuine, real connection. And real connection has this way of refusing to disappear, no matter how long it gets ignored. If they could speak to you right now without any fear holding them back, here's roughly what they'd probably say. I thought choosing someone else would make my life easier somehow. I was wrong about that. Walking away from you actually felt like walking away from a part of myself. I know I hurt you in the process. I know my silence left you confused and hurting. None of it was ever because you weren't enough for me. It was because I was terrified of how much you actually mattered to me. These exact words may not have reached you yet in real life, but they exist inside them right now, and they're only getting louder with time. This message is showing up now for a specific reason, because you've changed. You're not waiting around the same way you used to anymore. You've stopped questioning your own worth the way you once did. Your own growth quietly shifted the entire dynamic between you two. And when one person starts rising and moving forward, the other person tends to feel exactly what they lost in the process. They can sense that you're finally choosing yourself over everything else. They can sense that you're no longer available to sit around in confusion, waiting on them. They can feel time slipping through their fingers, whether they want to admit it or not. Here's the part that might genuinely catch you off guard. They aren't only regretting what happened in the past, they're questioning who they actually became along the way. They don't particularly like the version of themselves that walked away from you back then. Losing you changed something in them, and real growth, even when it's forced on us, tends to be deeply uncomfortable. So what does all of this actually mean for you, sitting here listening to it now? This message isn't asking you to wait around for anyone. It isn't asking you for forgiveness on anyone's behalf. What it's really offering you is clarity, plain and simple. You were never left behind because you lacked value as a person. You were stepped away from because you reflected a kind of depth that scared someone who wasn't ready for it yet. And whether this connection ever finds its way back to you or not, you are stronger now than you were before, and that matters more than anything else here. Don't miss what comes next, because it's the most important part of all this. Take one final, deep breath and let this last piece of truth really settle into you. You were real in a world that's absolutely full of people avoiding real intimacy. You were honest in a space that's largely ruled by fear and self-protection, and that alone makes you powerful in a way that shouldn't be underestimated. If they do come back into your life someday, you'll be able to answer them from a place of strength, not from desperate longing. And if they never come back at all, you'll still keep moving forward with your dignity fully intact, because you were never meant to beg anyone for clarity in the first place. You were always meant to understand your own worth on your own terms, with or without them.